Welcome to GateCrashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the door to your next favorite thing. Our mission, our creed, our code is this: to make all things nerdy more approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a universe you'll fall in love with.
Hi, I'm Dan. My pronouns are he, him.
And I'm Jake. I also use he, him pronouns.
We are joined by returning guest and gatecrasher in his own right, we have half the hive mind today. I have to redo my entire thing.
It's okay. We got this guy.
It's okay. The writer of Kang, Batman Beyond, Star Trek Year 5, and Joyride. One half of the hive mind himself, Jackson Lanzing. We are also joined by a new guest who is most certainly not just a werewolf in a trench coat, artist Dailen Ogden, who... Probably. Who together have created... Oh, fuck. Wifwulf?
Wifwulf. Yep. Yeah, you got it.
Their creator-owned project, now that we are going to dig into. Jake, back to you.
All right, so the hardest hitting question that we have, Jackson, you've been asked this before, but Dailen, favorite sandwich?
Favorite sandwich?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, so I'm a vegetarian, so that limits my options a little bit in terms of what you can get outside of like specialty sandwich shops and shit like that. You know, like can't just go to Subway for my favorite sandwich. But I'm very partial to like breakfast sandwiches. So you get like some eggs, some avocado, some sprouts, add some mayo, anything that's like that kind of veggie breakfast eggy blend, I think is my favorite, especially if you like toast it.
I mean, it's got to be real difficult to be a werewolf and, vegetarian.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's only difficult.
I mean, you get your protein at night.
Say what?
You get your protein at night, like, you just don't remember it.
Yeah, there you go.
And
it's fine.
Jackson.
It's easy if humans aren't meat.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Just humans are a completely different food group.
I just don't eat animals. That's all.
What we learned here today is cannibalism is okay.
It's not cannibalism when you're a wolf.
Oh, that's
It's not cannibalism if you can't remember it later, too.
Is that true?
I don't know.
Hell yeah. Love
Yes.
that play.
I'm going to go with yes.
Werewolves make their own rules, Jackson.
Well, for some court case somewhere, we just made precedent.
Hell yeah.
There you go.
Jackson, waffles or pancakes?
Oof. Well, so I have a standing tradition of pancakes every weekend. Like literally every Saturday and Sunday morning, I eat pancakes with my wife. Like she makes pancakes, I make bacon. It was in our vows. It's like a whole thing. So probably pancakes, just because I can't remember the last time I had a waffle. But when I was growing up, my preference was 1000% waffles all the time. Waffles nonstop, constantly waffles. So like in my heart, I'm a waffle boy, but in actual practice, I'm a pancake man.
Jackson, hold me to this because this is being recorded. Remind me at San Diego next year when we go together, I'm going to take you to a place. I think it's called like Cafe 318 or 912 or something like that. It's a couple blocks away from the con. And they serve the most incredible pumpkin waffles.
Shit.
Yeah. They're insane. Like they're one of those like little cafe restaurants that's like they sell like the mix for it out the back door because it's so
They're
good.
like they've been making this one thing. I very much subscribe to that sort of like Anthony Bourdain premise of like the best places are the places that have just been making this one thing for like 80 years. If you can find this one place, they make one thing for 80 years. It's only a breakfast
brunch place. And they fucking kill it.
That's my shit. There's a breakfast sandwich place in San Diego that my buddy Eric Carrasco brought me over to last year or like 2 years ago. That's literally just like out of a bodega. Like it's just a little bodega sandwich joint, and it doesn't look like anything. And he was like, "No, trust me, this is like the best breakfast in San Diego." And he was not incorrect. It was really good.
Okay, all right. So tradesies.
Breakfast trade. Hell yeah,
please.
I'm into this. Let's do it.
Well, we have that all recorded, so everyone knows now.
All right, everybody, come get waffles with us. Wifwulf waffles. Waffles with Wifwulf. Whiff waffles.
Oh, okay, I'm down. Let's go to San Diego, Dan.
Hell yeah.
I'll do my best.
And not for Thanksgiving. No, who's going to Thanksgiving Comic-Con?
No.
Yeah.
Going to San Diego Comic-Con 2022.
Yeah.
Not
There you
until
go.
then.
Let's just wait until some people are forced to get the vaccine.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's band-aids.
Oh, yeah. Well, California's got one. We'll be fine. We'll make it happen. San Diego's in California.
Thank you.
Do that.
For now.
What was the planning process like for this Kickstarter?
Oh, man.
For the
Look,
Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Wifwulf has been a thing we've been working on for like 5 years. And putting the Kickstarter up was very much one of those things that we didn't do until we knew we were, like the book was going to happen. So
Until we knew it was go time.
So like the book's been written for years. Dailen's been drawing it for years. They finally got it to a place where they were like, I think it's going to finish in like X amount of weeks. So if we started the Kickstarter, I think we started talking about doing this in like July, something like that, in terms of like when we were actually gonna launch it. And then we knew we wanted to launch it in October because spooky season. And of course, that's really when we want to, get people talking about werewolves. And that seemed like an easy move for us. And then it was really just a matter of circling our thoughts with how we wanted to do the tiers, and none of us had ever done a Kickstarter really before that we'd like fully organized. Colin had done a source book for Champions of the Earth, our podcast, but like otherwise we really never done anything. So
we are very, very thankful to Jaslyn Stone for joining our team and helping us out,
huge.
because otherwise, like this Kickstarter, like it wasn't bad before we like brought her in. Like our ideas were there, but like she really just kind of like molded it into
and
shape.
Jaslyn only joined like 2 weeks before launch, so we were
it was
like
really
we were
fast.
right against it, and then suddenly we had this great asset to be like this new team member who was able to come in and say like, boom, all right, here's what we're gonna do, how's it, here's how you gotta handle it, which was lovely, because otherwise I don't think we would have known exactly what we were doing. But all of that is to say, what I learned out of it is Kickstarter looks like a nightmare process that's going to take up all of your time. And while sometimes it is, it's not nearly as difficult as it might seem. And once the thing is on rails and is like running, if your audience shows up, it's a pretty profound experience.
It's amazing.
All right, my next question is, who and what are some of your creative influences?
Do you want to go first?
No, I went
Jack,
first on
or
the last one. You go first this time.
Okay,
This is the Colin.
straight
The
up.
Colin and I special is we just always trade who goes first. Every interview,
okay.
just constant trade.
I will become
Look at you!
Colin
Look at
then.
you! You are the Colin now.
I gotta channel some beard. Gotta channel some thumbs
I
up.
mean, from all the podcasts we've done with them, all of Colin's energy is in his eyes.
Oh, okay.
Like
All right.
you can see it in that image behind Jackson.
That's true.
It's that.
That's
It's
really
that.
difficult for me because on top of wearing glasses, I've also had half of a drink, so now I'm like tired. But
And this is why I'm not drinking at 3
I will do
p.m.
my best. Anyway, to talk about my influences. So I got my start actually as a fine artist before I ever got into comic books. So I did a fair bit of studying of like old masters and stuff before I ever so as a kid, I was really into some comics, like, I was super into manga specifically. And so like, I definitely had that like sequential interest in my background, but I had gone on in college to pursue fine art. And then from there, I pivoted like after the first year, I think, or the first semester of my college experience into illustration and more like commercial type art stuff. And so before I ever got into comics, like my big influences were like, I was really into Alphonse Mucha, the Austrian Art Nouveau artist. I really love like Yoshitaka Amano's work. I'm really into William Adolphe Bouguereau. He's a really great painter. And then as I started to get into sequential stuff, you can definitely see the influences there as well, because I'm really into Becky Cloonan's work, and definitely one glance at Wifwulf will say that, like, her stuff is something like that I really idolize. Same with Emma Rios of Pretty Deadly. Her stuff is high up on my inspiration list, and I definitely feel like you can see a little bit of that in Wifwulf as well. As for colors and stuff, I'm really into Lee Luffridge's work, and also Matt Wilson. Like those guys, the really like bright, in your face, evocative color, kind of throwing the rules out the window in service of the mood and tone of the story, I think is really, really rad.
I think colonized influences run a pretty wide gamut because we are two individuals with a lot of sort of different thoughts. But on Wifwulf, the influence is pretty fundamental. Like a lot of it comes from folklore and from the folklore we grew up with. And in a lot of ways, what that means is, because we grew up on comics and this kind of thing, a lot of it is Neil Gaiman. A lot of it is the stuff that we pulled out of Sandman and out of Good Omens and out of the short story books. And I mean, I was a ravenous Neil Gaiman reader as a middle schooler and high schooler. So a great deal of this comes from that. He's also probably the closest thing I have to like a horror writer that I'm super into, other than Stephen King. And I wouldn't really say this is much of a King project, though there are aspects to this in terms of the sort of fundamental pressure cooker of Wifwulf, and in how it's structured and how it kind of explodes into itself, that is kind of Kingish, that does remind of something like The Shining or something, which were big influences on me growing up as well. But yeah, I'd say here especially the big ones all come down to like oral storytelling tradition, a little bit of poetry. I'm trying to think of like the poets who really vibe on this level, because like a lot of my favorite stuff is all like beat poetry and shit like that. I wouldn't say like Ferlin Getty is like a big influence here, but it's more that like that sense of the story becoming increasingly surreal and the story becoming kind of increasingly internal in terms of its understanding of what's going on. That really felt like where we could, look to poetry and look to maybe even more cinematic influences like Robert Eggers, I think is actually a pretty solid influence on this. Though obviously Robert Eggers is very influenced by a lot of other art, but his work, especially in The Witch and in The Lighthouse, like these stories that get sort of increasingly disconnected from what we understand as reality and myth and start to kind of open up that understanding of like what it can mean when you step into the unknown really fundamentally. That's a big part of Wifwulf. So I'd say that we've got a big chunk of Robert Eggers. I think we got a big chunk of Neil Gaiman, and hopefully somewhere in the middle there, Miyazaki. And I think like some...
Yeah, well, it's funny you should mention that, because when I pitch Wifwulf to other people, I tell people it's The Witch meets Princess Mononoke.
Yeah, it's
basically.
Robert Eggers' Princess Mononoke. That's effectively correct. Yes.
Well, if I hadn't already pledged money, I would have said, I'm sold.
I'm actually super excited
I'm going to go
one
up a
day
tier
to cover Robert Eggers, and it's just an episode where Jake and I are screaming at each other about lobster. It's going to be great.
Wait, hold on. Well, are there episodes where we don't scream at each other?
No, Jake, this is going to be very different. It's going to be in black and white, and we're going to die.
Just don't invite any seagulls. I have that Super Yaki shirt that's the Willem Dafoe speech, but it's all but it's done like the Star Wars crawl. And I wear it. I wore it on set to a thing I directed the other day, and not a single person got it. And I was like, why have none of you seen The Lighthouse? Like I became Willem Dafoe. I was training everywhere and just like cursing everyone. It was great.
Oh, God, that was such a movie.
I know. So yeah, I think that's a pretty solid referendum on like what we on the creative influences on this book. They're all over the place, and I would say honestly, our biggest creative influence on this book is Dailen Ogden. I'll be honest.
Oh, I mean,
like
there you go.
These interviews are like so fun and great, and they also always catch me off guard how much you guys just gas me up constantly in them.
Too bad. That's how this works. Like,
I'm gonna get it first.
Hell
I'm gonna
yeah.
do it.
Hell
I'm
yeah.
there.
Let's do it.
All right, so
And I mean
go ahead.
that inspiration is cyclical as well, because that none of Wifwulf's art would be the way it is without reading the script and being like, okay, now I need to go lie down.
And I think it was literally an email I got from you once. It was like, I've just read this. I have to lie down now.
I absolutely think that was an email I sent you guys. Like, this stressed me out a lot, and I mean that as a compliment. So I'm gonna go lay down, and then later I'm gonna get up and draw.
And draw, you did.
I did. Oh, since you guys mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast as well, I feel like I should highlight this. My pronouns are she and they, so feel free to switch back and forth between them to your heart's content.
I've programmed it in my brain so that like every third or fourth pronoun I just swap it. It's absolute chaos energy. I'm super into it.
Hearing it gives me gender euphoria. I'm about it. So I appreciate it. And just in case it's confusing for the listeners, that's what's going on here.
Can you just just gonna refer to you as the Wifwulf.
Please.
All right, so what do
Your Highness also works?
All right, that works. Done. That's a power move. And it worked.
I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
Their Highness.
Their Highness.
That is very good.
That is good. All right, so what do wolves mean to you as symbols and metaphors?
So, within the context of Wifwulf, wolves are meaning on meaning. But Wifwulf is, just for anybody who's unfamiliar with the story and who hasn't checked out the Kickstarter yet and hopefully is hearing this for the first time and wants to go check out the Kickstarter. Wifwulf is the story of Charity Bjornsdottir, a young woman in basically post-Civil War Montana, who is married off to a returning soldier and becomes sort of increasingly isolated within her marriage. The wolves within the context of the story are a childhood freedom for her, because when she was young, she met this wolf named Silver Slash at the edge of the woods. And Silver Slash, rather than being sort of like scared of her or being aggressive to her, rather found a real like comfort with her and she with him, and the two of them really created this very strong bond. And that bond extended into adulthood and extends into her marriage and becomes a point of contention between her and her husband, who sees wolves as a threat and sees wolves as something to be afraid of and something to shoot at, etc. So within the context of the story,
I do hope that after you said all of that one of the wolves does eat the husband.
I no spoilers. No
spoilers. This is just my. This is just what I want to see.
I think you will be happy with the direction of the story without telling you whether or not you are correct about that particular detail. But what I will say is that the general understanding of the story, with in terms of like how wolves factor into it, is that they are a reflection of the time you have to yourself, of the time you. Of like the truth you can find within yourself when other people aren't trying to tell you who you are or what to be or how to act or how to feel. That weirdly for wolves, who are pack animals and obviously are all about family and about reinforcement, for Charity, wolves are an expression of individual identity. They're a way for her to understand and claim the things she already feels inside. It's a pack that she can join that is on her wavelength in a way that the human wavelength is not. And that, I think that sense of what wolves can be in terms of a metaphor for freedom and a metaphor for individual identity is really interesting, especially insofar as it sort of bounces up against that idea of wolves as a self-sustaining pack.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really great to note that like the wolves in Wifwulf specifically they literally represent a kind of like unconditional love and kinship that runs directly counter to what we see happening in her marriage. So in that sense, like wolves are the kind of family you want, the ones who are steadfastly by your side to protect you. not to tear you down. And in a broader sense, the werewolf myth is kind of the perfect backdrop for the story to play out on, because it's all about sort of tearing yourself apart and finding something entirely new. And for a story about relationship abuse, I think that there's something sort of freeing about the idea of willingly tearing those parts of you away and finding the parts of you that are actually real underneath, the parts of you that are genuine and unfiltered and free, compared to what shape you've sort of been forced into by the circumstances of your life.
I think a lot of werewolf stories tend to vibe on these ideas of like warring packs, or who's the alpha, or like there's a lot of things that werewolf stories tend to like default back into, pure blood werewolves or pure blood wolves versus like mongrel wolves and all this kind of stuff. None of that sort of plays a factor in Wifwulf, and it's one of the reasons that it
not a very tropey werewolf
exactly
story.
And that's what really drew me to it, honestly. It's not that werewolves are a thing I've never really liked, but I do find them generally very tropey. I feel like when I think of werewolves, I think of True Blood, and it's very hard for me to not just see Manganiello every time. And I think that's because most werewolf stories play pretty directly on that, or play on the like American Werewolf in London aspect of just like, oh my God, isn't it awful? I'm losing control and I'm becoming this thing that I can't stop from killing people, which is a lot of monster stories. What we wanted to do here was tell a story that turned being a werewolf into something that was aspirational and tragic at the same time. That idea of exactly to Dalen's point, right? That idea of what you have to tear away from yourself to be the person that you are is a really, I think it's very salient in a time when we are all looking at what in our culture and what in our personalities and what in our families and what in our societies we want to keep and what we need to burn. And that's the more that we have those conversations, the more that Wifwulf felt really vibrant. And it's really interesting to think that Wifwulf was designed effectively in 2015, 2016. And the culture conversation that's happened just over that 5 years of Wifwulf, I would have imagined it would have made Wifwulf a little redundant. And I in retrospect, I think all it's done is strengthen it and make its point more salient. So that's, I think we're trying to do something very different with werewolves here.
Definitely.
I love changing the metaphor, like with the werewolf and doing what you're doing rather than the thing that's been treaded on so many times. Before I ask you some heavier questions, I do want to ask, now the book is being put out with Vault. How did this partnership come about?
They came to us. We had been very hopeful that a team up with Vault would be possible. They were always the only publisher we were going to approach about Wifwulf. But once we committed to doing it on Kickstarter, we frankly didn't need a publisher. We were just like, we're just going to do it ourselves. We'll manage it. It'll be fine. And then we had that first day, and we funded in 9 hours. And now we're almost double our goal. And that was a bigger pack than maybe we initially anticipated coming to the book. Certainly we would have hoped, right? But my very like pessimistic realism, because I've been through a lot of heartbreaking comics, would be to say, oh well, there's no way that's going to happen, right? So let's just prepare for a version where we're fighting for that 20K up until the last minute. And instead we funded in 9 hours. And so it was sort of a question mark at that point of like, okay, well, now we really need to think about how we're going to print this, how we're going to fulfill this, how this thing's really going to happen, and how we're going to do it at scale if this continues to grow. If this pack does get to 1,000 people, which like right now we're 30 people from 1,000, right? Like we're very close. So given that we're building this this backer base, we wanted to make sure that they got serviced in the best way possible, and that it wasn't just us running them through BackerKit and then delaying as long as we needed to produce the book. That we had a company that was fundamentally good at this, that knew what they were doing, that we trusted with the story, that wouldn't take our rights, and most importantly, were willing to take it to market so that our backers weren't the only people who could see Wifwulf. Obviously, they'll have a special version of it, but we want to make sure, and then we want to underline that a million times, like the backer version of Wifwulf will not be in retail stores.
Vault has been so wonderful about that because right from the get-go, they're like, okay, we're printing a special version of it for your backers that has all the bells and whistles. Like, they're the only ones who are going to get this fancy version. But then it still allowed us, to take it to market in a more basic form, so that, backers still get this like really cool special experience that we designed for them. But that, other people still get to experience the story just by stumbling on it in a bookstore.
And a big part of how this came about, honestly, I think it's twofold. One is Vault has been looking to work with Dailen for years. I don't know if we were the introducing element there, but I've certainly been putting Dalen's work in front of Adrian and Damien for 5 years, right? Because we met at the same show. I'm pretty sure. Or we met later, but we met them at an LA Comic Con. We met Dailen at an LA Comic Con, at WonderCon. It was Kamikaze versus WonderCon. But same show floor, just different shows. Regardless, I've been putting it in front of them for a while. So I was like, look, you gotta see their art. Like, it's incredible. She's fucking got it. And they knew that was out there. Like, they got it. It was just a matter of like when that was going to be the right move. And obviously Wifwulf is not a multi-volume book. It's not designed to be a series. It's designed to be a one and done. So we wanted to make sure that if we were going to put this in front of them and they were going to break their model for it, that it was really worth them doing. So, fortunately, I have Adrian's number. I've got Damien's number. I can just text those boys and be a total, obnoxious person because I've been working with them since they started, right? Like Zojicon was one of their first books. We did Dark One with them. We're doing the next volume of Dark One now with them. And so it was a question of like, when are we going to make this thing happen? And as we got to that funding point, we started to be able to hit them up and say, all right, you want to jump on? And they were very willing very quickly to say like, yeah, let's go, which was wonderful. And has continued to just be like, the deal came together very quickly and very easily because they respect the hell out of their creators. It was exactly the reason why we wanted to do it, right? Was that and especially because we came in with the money, it wasn't a matter of us having to take from Vault. Vault didn't do this because they were trying to buy into the rights. Vault did this because they love this thing and want to get it out there. And there's so few publishers who just do it for the love of the game. And I'm not saying that Vault do it exclusively for the love of the game. No business does. But there's a huge component in that company that a lot of other publishers just straight up can't match because they're beholden to all of these other moneyed interests. And Vault is just beholden to like, do Adrian and Damien love it and think that it won't bankrupt the company? Huzzah. Which is just
it's really like, it's magical how much that they believe in Wifwulf. Like throughout this, deal and talking with them behind the scenes about what's possible, it's so cool just to see them look at this book and be like, yeah, we want to take this as high as it'll go. And we're so excited to be bringing them on board for that. Because it just, that rising tide elevates, like lifts all the ships.
Yeah. I feel like some people do believe that I'm on their bankroll just because I do scream about Vault pretty much constantly.
Yes, he does.
As with this book, I turned on my notifications for Jackson's Twitter. So as soon as it came up, I was the first backer. I literally read nothing. I went right in and I funded it. I was like, done. I don't care what it is. I'm in.
So yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate
it was good afterwards that I read it and I was like, oh, good. This is a good book. Like they're not doing something weird. So seeing that Vault was in like afterwards, I was like, fuck, this is a book for me. So
hell yeah.
So
somewhere along the line of this conversation, I did go up my tiers. So
hey, thank you. Love that.
More money.
I love that. Hell yes.
Let's see if you guys can get more money out of me.
Let's transition to some.
I'm gonna keep trying to be as charming as possible. We'll see if it works.
Just keep drinking the beer. We'll see who's. So let's move on to some of the heavier themes.
Yeah.
So when writing a story that draws heavily on trauma, how do you approach it without giving too much of yourself into it? I know good art comes from pain and things like that, but how do you draw the line in how much of yourself you put into something?
I mean, I guess I can only speak for myself. I kind of don't. I feel like Wifwulf is me just genuinely kind of like bleeding all over the place. It is my ugly festering wound that I have then picked out and used to splatter paint into something. But I don't know. Like, I think that line sort of moves. It's a line in the sand, you know, not carved into the ground. Where it depends on the project and it depends on what you're hoping to get out of it for yourself too. For me, Wifwulf has been a very cathartic thing to work on. And I felt like, at least on my end of it, that there was nothing to do but go all in. Because this is the book for that. This is if you look at the pages, if you're scrolling the Kickstarter, you know, like this represents kind of the best work that I can physically do. Like, I am trying my hardest on every page, on every panel. And so like, it only seemed right to go in on it that hard emotionally as well. And like, whether it does well or not, like, it'll be easy to stick me in my soft underbelly, but at least I know for myself that I've done, you know, everything I could possibly do to make this as wrenching and as real as I possibly can.
I that's also just a place where Dailen like really helped us get where it needed to get for us, because we can talk about relationship abuse. We've been through versions of that, but it is going to look different when you're on our side of the like gender spectrum, frankly, based on like how abuse tends to appear. And so we can write from that, but at some point or another, we really need to understand the lived experience that Dailen's gone through. That honesty up front in the project, which was, I mean, it came early, right? It was like early in the process. We'd taken a look at the image that inspired this whole thing, which is now our banner image, right? But which has been through a whole bunch of iterations. But is that, you know, a piece from 2014, 2015? 2016.
Yeah, 16.
So we had the 2016 bit. We got that image. We were like, tell us everything. And Dailen, rather than being like, well, here's the mythology behind this character, because that wasn't really there. Instead, it was, here's my story. And here's what I'm processing. And I don't really think I'm ready to write about this. Do you think you are? And we had to have a sort of honest conversation about like, look, like, is this even our story to tell? And like, we had Dailen basically telling us like, it is, it's okay. You can do this. And so with,
because I don't want to.
And so kind of with that permission, especially because this project came out of another project we were going to do together that we decided not to do because we were playing in someone else's playground that none of us were comfortable playing in. And so it was like, all right, like maybe instead let's backtrack this and really focus on something that we can all talk about. And so with that confidence behind us and with that amount of honesty from Dailen, then it was really just a matter of finding those places where we could bring in our own personal things. And look, part of that is that we have both had experiences that were kind of charity-ish, but we've also both had experiences where we've been the husband. We've both been in that position of like knowing like, oh, like our own anger or insecurity or other toxic male bullshit all like gets it comes out of you, like it comes out of your pores. It happens sometimes, and it's less about trying to like understand that you have to purge that from you entirely, and more understanding that like when that does happen, you got to fucking catch it, and not make that somebody else's problem. That's your problem. Go deal with it. And suffice to say, that's not really a thing that Charity's husband has any kind of like understanding or recognition of, but in having sympathy is a weird word in this particular context, but in having understanding and lived experience, and I guess some sympathy for like what it means to have those feelings. That was I
think sympathy is a good word.
That was an important aspect of this thing too. So it's not like we're sitting there transcribing individual conversations from our lives, but I'm certainly transcribing feelings I've had or moods I've been in or ways that that's come through. And then you get to the other side of that, to the point that is about how you rise above and how you separate from humanity and how you do that kind of thing. And that, I think, is its own sort of step that I think is very much transcribing transcendental experiences that I've had, or that Colin has had, that don't necessarily mean quite literally what is going on in the time, like, but that you either under the influence of like, psilocybin or just in a weird context in your own life where you have to recognize that things are bigger than you, that you come to sort of poetic conclusions about your own story and your own experience. And there's things in my life that I can't explain, and I'm not going to be here sitting here and be like, I've seen UFOs. Like, that's not what I mean. What I mean is like there are periods there. I'm not a person who sits there believing in God a lot, but there are orders and chaoses to the universe that happen. I see them in my life. Everybody does. We whether or not it's a story we tell ourselves or not. And that stuff also bled into Wifwulf, even in the ways that aren't, again, I haven't gone through this exact literal experience. This isn't a biography, but I think it comes from a very personal place at some point on every page.
Absolutely. I actually just wanted to circle back to and mention that, like, I think saying like that you have, as you write, like sympathy for the husband is actually kind of the perfect way to describe it. Especially like in the age of social media, a lot of the conversations that we have about abuse are so flat and one-dimensional. And what they do is they sort of like when you dehumanize an abusive person to the point where they're just like a monster, like all of a sudden you can't recognize that stuff in your own behavior. It's like anybody could be either one of them. And it's really important to understand yourself well enough that you don't go that direction. Like life is not super cleanly divided out into abusers and victims, like everybody can play both roles under the right circumstances. And so like, it was really special to help with this script and, read it over and give my thoughts, because like, I appreciate that we are not having a black and white conversation about like relationship abuse or what it looks like or what it means.
I do want to follow up with you directly, Dailen, because this sounds like a lot of this is it's like your heart, like, and they've helped refine and kind of put those things to the page. Has this been a cathartic experience, or is this something like when you're working on it, you like need to take some time and like walk away and like come back?
I would say it's been the former mostly, actually. Like I mentioned this the other day in another interview, but like I actually ended up towards the end veering kind of radically off script because in the time that it's taken me to draw it since getting that iteration of the script, like I feel like I've changed as a person. And so I was looking for a different sort of way to resolve things at the end that still sort of captured the same kind of feeling, but like added a little bit of extra kind of, I don't want to say nuance, because like we've had a very nuanced experience working on this. But like, as with the conversations not being black and white, like the feelings kind of aren't either. There's a sort of entire spectrum of things going on inside of you when you deal with this kind of stuff. And even at the end, when it's finished, like it's a feeling that is like, it's difficult to describe in words, but I'm really hoping that I manage to evoke it at the end of the comic as you read.
From a lot of the description that on the page of the Kickstarter, it deals a lot with isolation, and a lot of the isolation is forced upon the main character. Do you think do you think the growth of getting out of isolation is more about reconnection, or is it more about rediscovering who you are to then reconnect?
It's definitely both. It's those two things are so deeply intertwined, like two chains of DNA together, like it is all about sort of like getting out from under this situation and figuring out who you are and your boundaries, but also by being sort of welcomed back into the fold of people who love you. So much of like that self-discovery happens because you're in a safe place with people who get it and with people who support you and who want you to grow and want you to blossom. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Jackson. Like so much of it happens because you are in a place where you actually have like the safety and the space to explore it. So like those things definitely go hand in hand. They happen simultaneously. It goes in fits and starts. Like it's not a linear process, but it's very much like two things that uplift the other, just spiraling upwards.
It's also really one of the reasons I was smiling there is because I wasn't even thinking about us, though. Though my mother will always remember Dailen at my wedding because Dailen made like such an impression on my mom. Oh yeah,
I did. Oh my god,
you said some very nice things about me. I think.
I did. I don't even remember what I said.
It was very nice, I'm sure. But
sure.
No, there was there's a scene in the book that I can't really talk about without spoiling one of my favorite things about the book.
Just blinking Morse code at me.
Well, it's the scene where exactly what Dailen just talked about happens within the context of Wifwulf. And that scene of sort of being re-embraced, but also discovering and tearing that part of yourself, it sounds so beautiful, and then you funnel it through werewolves and body horror, and it becomes like mythic and
it's very
brutal, and
but it's also brutal emotionally.
Yeah,
when you do
exactly.
Like,
I think that's kind of the point. Is that like you so much of abuse story, when it's told from outside of the context, treats recovery sort of like you're going up a long steep road and then you crest and there's a sun, on the horizon, and you're like, everything's gonna be fine, and then you walk towards the sun and the credits roll and everything, and like it's not a horror story, but it truly is still a horror story even at that point, because even at that point when you are having to go through all of this, you're going through it. It's not happening to you, and it's not happening absent you. You are the only person who can pull yourself through, and the people around you are going to pull you through. And there's something scary about trusting other people after going through a thing where you have learned not to trust. There's something scary about learning to trust yourself when you've learned not to trust. And there's something I mean, and again, this is a place where I can only speak from limited shared experience, right? But there's something very scary about understanding that the person that you thought you were isn't exactly the person that you are. And learning how to embrace who it is you are as opposed to who it is you thought you were. That's all. Those are horror stories too. Horror stories don't need to be just bleak and sad and tragic. They can also be uplifting and interesting. And thoughtful. Again, I think The Witch is a great example of this, of a story that is fundamentally uplifting, even if it is horrible and scary and a horror story. I love the ending of that movie. I wish that happened to me when I was a kid. Let's go to I effectively did. My mom was a witch, so I had a very similar upbringing.
Please tell your mom that I love her. I just like anytime I get reminded that she exists, I'm just like, Jack's mom is so nice.
I sometimes describe. I don't do it a lot, but like I'll do it on the podcast. When I was a young man, like I turned 13, and all my friends were having like bar and bat mitzvahs and confirmations and stuff like that, and my mom was like, she's a witchy druid, basically. She kind of has her own like vibe on what this stuff means. And so she did a bunch of research and then got all of my adult friends together and took me to the woods and like painted me blue, and we did a like ritual in the woods for my 13th birthday. Like I have pictures of it of like I'm topless with like blue like sigils. We went through like a whole thing, and then we like did a big party with like my friends and bagpipes, because I was a weird
were you still
kid.
Blue at the party?
I'm incredibly jealous.
I'm sure I was. I'm sure I was still at least to some degree blue. But that was the but that was like the whole thing, is that she really awoke in me that sense of like, don't let Like, don't let the wider culture tell you who you are, but also don't think that you get to decide it entirely. There's a culture around you. There's a family around you. There are people who will bring that up in you. So even now, you know, decades later, I think about becoming a man and I'm like, oh, well, there was that time that all of my friends took me out into the woods and we all burned scrolls and cut ropes and made sigils and I was blue. So, you know, it's all in the game.
I'm sorry, guys. I actually have to end this interview early because I need to go out into the woods and cut ropes and like, I'm very jealous. I didn't get anything cool like that when I turned 13.
Can we talk to your mom?
I'm gonna find some photos for you, Dailen. I'm on this.
Please.
Wow. That's badass. That's all. Damn. So I'm yeah, all right.
now you fear my magic powers, right? Yeah.
Quick little round of applause for Jackson's mom, who is just the coolest lady. Every time I learn more about her, like the fact that she likes me feels like a high honor.
I'm trying to get her on the show next time. Just no more Jackson.
There you go. That's what's up.
That's your mom.
That's what's up.
So there's a lot of loneliness that comes from this isolation. How is that something you display in your art, Your Highness?
My art. Actually, funny you should mention that. I have a specific visual motif that I followed throughout the entire book. And that is that the panel shapes actually get less organic and more boxy the further that she gets into isolation and the more that she is put into civilization and like isolated from her wild soul, her wild side. And then obviously, when it's time for her to go back to the woods, things explode back into the shapes of tree branches and water and fog and silhouettes. Things get, they go from organic to very rigid and then back to organic again as the story progresses.
I love paneling like that.
The layouts in this book.
I'm so excited for this thing.
I had a lot of fun with them. I'm gonna be real. So that was like a really big thing, and that includes up to and including a moment actually where and I've shared these pictures on or these pages on social media before, so it's not a spoiler. But there is a moment where Charity, as a young woman, you know, as a young married woman, has a moment in the woods with Silver Slash where she's looking at him and trying to have this moment of like, should I stay or should I go kind of thing. And she's framed by like a squared off border as he's coming out of this like wild like woods shape. And then it's like two panels of her kind of looking and then looking away. And then as she walks away, he is surrounded by foliage and she's boxed in the distance. So I spent a lot of time like really thinking about like how I could use these sort of motifs as a way to continuously kind of highlight the changes in her state of mind and her isolation. Another thing that pops up all the time, and I don't even know if Jackson and Colin have noticed it, but when she looks out a window, there's usually a spider web. And it's because, you know, she's trapped. Like it's all
I had not noticed that. Like, immediately goes to the pages to go look.
Yeah, you know, it was my intent to throw an Easter egg into basically every single place I could. So there is all kinds of, you know, symbolic framing, symbolic foliage, symbolic imagery.
I mean, the book is extraordinarily thoughtful. I mean, I think that's as somebody who, like, you know, Colin and I work with several artists. We have worked with so many incredible people, and like, not to speak ill of anyone, Dailen is one of the most thoughtful, if not the most thoughtful artist we've worked with. Like, everything they're doing is intentional. And part of the point of that is that it takes it takes time, because they're not just taking the script and doing the script. They're taking the script, finding the meaning in the scene, doing the meaning. And then that's going to come back to us and we're going to re-script. And we've worked with artists like that. Like, you know, there were artists like Carlos Magno on Kang, who effectively do the script as written and just find a way to elevate everything you had, where it's like, oh, I thought I wrote this great scene, but actually I wrote this awesome scene because Carlos turned it into, you know, something, you know, fucking beyond. But then there are artists who, and there's artists who, like, you don't tell what to do, like Marcus Toe. Like, we don't write Marcus's layouts. We have like a deal with him on Joyride where we wrote it like a screenplay. This is our first time working with Dailen, so we just wrote it like a normal script. And what we've discovered now is like, no, like you can really like give Dailen scene meaning. You can give them everything that needs to be there from like an artistic perspective, and then they're going to tell the story. And at the end of the process, we'll go through and figure out what words are necessary to really make that story pop. But so much of the document, as in some ways the best comic scripts are, so much of the document was just a love letter to the artist to inspire them to do great work. And obviously here she is doing incredible work that's like very, very thoughtful. So it's lovely.
My very favorite page in the entire script is the one that just said, "You know what this page looks like, Dailen. Go fucking nuts."
Yeah. Those are also our favorite pages to do because they require so little work on our side. Whenever we get to one of those where we're like, "Go fucking nuts,"
You were right. I did know what it looked like.
You get a nice surprise at the end.
Yeah. Fucking exactly.
This is good. This is great.
I have to, like, so many of these questions, like, we've already answered. Now, with the story
what shade of blue was it?
with the story being set in the American frontier, do you think you have more freedom in telling a new interpretation of the werewolf mythos there rather than telling it in like a modern time?
Yeah, that was very much the intention. Part of it is that I think it's twofold. One is that, and this is weird to think about, but truthfully, Colin and I aren't super fond of telling stories in the modern era. We do it on occasion. I'm literally looking at our books, and it's like outside of DC stuff, which naturally sort of sits in the modern era. But even there, Gotham City Garage, outside of time. Genlock, outside of time. Kang the Conqueror, outside of time. Metal, outside of time. Like, you can... Green Arrow is like the only thing we've done that felt like... And like Batman and Robin Eternal, it was actually like in time. Hacktivist is probably the only thing we've written that really takes place in like our world. Zojacon is very specifically a reflection of another one. Dark One is very much a reflection of another one. Star Trek is obviously Star Trek. Harbinger, the thing we're doing at Valiant, might be the only thing right now that we're doing that like is just like modern epoch. Batman Beyond is the future.
Yeah, Beyond.
And yeah, exactly. And a big part of that, I think, is that we like to create a sense of world. And when you set something in the modern era, a lot of that sense of world comes down to the artist. And it comes down to the sense of tone that you're building. Whereas when you set it in a different time period, you get to bring the audience into sort of a neutral zone where you can meet on a mutual understanding that, like, yeah, this probably isn't exactly Montana in the 1850s, right? It's probably not exactly correct, or 1860s. It's probably not exactly.
I did my
right, exactly. Right. It's not to say we didn't try, right? We do research. We're big research nerds. That's another reason we do it, is we just like research. But, and especially Colin was huge on research on this one. I'll just big up him because like he wrote the first draft of the first chunk of this story when I was still trying to figure out how we were going to tackle it, and he was just like, I'm going to do it, and like and really gave me the confidence to like jump in on it. But the more that we've been able to create a place where we can meet the audience in the middle, take everybody out of their context, and then tell the story, I think I certainly find it a little easier or a little more immersive, I guess, for the audience, rather than having a thing where you get to constantly be asking questions like, why does this character have a cell phone? Or I wonder who's president. Like, I don't want you thinking about the difference between this world and our world. I want you to be in the world of the thing. And the more that it's set in the modern era, the more you run into that issue. So I think that's part of it. And the other part of it is when you're telling a folklore story, doing it modern feels weird, feels fundamentally off. There's a reason Robert Eggers' stories don't take place now. All of his stuff is time displaced. And there's a reason for that. Most of Neil Gaiman's stuff, though it can reflect to the now, really has its roots in other times and other worlds. And so this was very much us trying to do the same thing.
Well, normally we just have one end question, but we have to do separate ones because Dailen, you're new.
Hell yeah.
If you had a Rube Goldberg machine, what would it do?
You want me to answer first?
Yes.
Okay. It would be kind of handy if I had a Rube Goldberg machine that watered my plants for me. Like, especially because plants don't need to be watered as often as most people think. So that would give me plenty of time to set it back up. The only problem with that, obviously, is that my plants I have a large enough collection at this point that they all need to be watered at different times and they all need different kinds of water. And now I have some that actually only take distilled water, like little bougie babies.
Oh my God.
What? Those exist?
I bought a distiller for my collection. Yeah, I sometimes I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, who are
Those
you?
plants better appreciate
Distilling your
you.
own water like a fucking weirdo. But anyway, yeah. So I think a machine that could occasionally water my plants for me would be nice.
I like it.
Or one that just repeatedly like throws the ball or plays tug of war with my puppy because she is so strong. She's so strong.
I think you're the first person who's thought about the cleanup, that like resetting it up too. So
I mean, you have to, right? Like
my Rube Goldberg machine is just a Rube Goldberg machine that cleans up Dalen's Rube Goldberg machine.
Hey.
So Jackson, because you've answered this before,
it's true.
You're such a great friend.
I had to think of one on the spot. And listen, since we've last spoken, you've been in a shit ton more new worlds and things like that, and you and Colin personally are at fault for making me a Trekkie. So
take that.
Yeah, out of all of the worlds you've worked in, which one does Quark fit into?
That's not Star Trek.
Yes. Well, yeah. Come on, you gotta think about Star Trek.
Yeah. I mean, look. Joyride is Star Trek, but what if everyone was Quark? So I think that one's
right.
too easy because like effectively Kolstak the Wanderer is like our like weird take on like what if Quark was a Jedi. But no, I think of all of the worlds that we have written, the one where Quark fits in the best is probably is probably going to be our version of Neo Gotham in Batman Beyond, just because he would do real well on the whole like merchant side of things. He'd really sell a lot. He'd do really well. A lot of people need stuff. It's a very like dingy, consumer sort of focused world. There's a lot of big businesses. I think Quark would do great business in Neo Gotham. But if Quark did find himself in Zojacon, he would be president in like a week. Like I feel like Quark would teach, because the whole point of Zojacon is that they're an extremely adaptable society that is constantly adapting to whatever the new stuff they're taught. And I feel like Quark would show up and immediately just like, to use another Trek reference, Sigma Iosha these guys, which is like that episode in Star Trek original series where they leave a book about gangsters and they come back and the whole planet's turned into like a like 1930s gangster movie. I feel like Quark would have them all just eating out of his hand.
The Ferengi rules of acquisition.
Yeah. The rules of acquisition would be all over that thing. He'd be getting Umox every night. He's like he's the Grand Nagus in a heartbeat.
I was gonna say too, I feel like he'd fit in a little bit better, like the shape of his head than in Neo Gotham.
That's they're all based on axolotls, so they all have those weird ears that Nathan gave them. So yeah, it's actually a really good point.
My first thought was because I was like, I feel like he would run
the town. Yeah, easy.
Well, it's always a pleasure having you, Dailen. Very nice meeting you. Where can people find you?
Likewise.
Where can people find you, the Kickstarter, and any other projects that you've got? You pick who goes first.
Okay, I'll go first, I guess. Where can people find me? So I do have a website. It's DailenOgdenIllustration.com. No caps, no spaces, nothing like that. I really need to update it right now, so maybe don't look at it yet. But actually, primarily, It's usually easiest to keep up with me on social media. I'm at Dailen Ogden on Twitter and at Dailen on Instagram. Those are kind of my two primary active ones. In terms of other projects, this book has required so much from me that I've been drawing till my hands fall off. So there's really not anything else to look at right now. But following me on social media is definitely the best place to keep an eye out for the next project. It's most likely going to be me returning to my webcomic, which is called The Liminal, which is tonally very different from Wifwulf, but will eventually be equally as emotional and horrific. So
oh no, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, did I not tell you that it's Eldritch body
I don't know
horror?
what happens in the liminal. I know what you've written and what I've read. That's all I've got.
Oh, well, I'll spoil it for you sometime.
Very
I
excited. That was a witch laugh, hardcore. I'm easy to find. I'm at Jackson Lanzing on Twitter. Lanzing. Everyone likes to put an S in the middle or take out the N so that my name rhymes with Danzig. It doesn't. Lanzing. So you can go ahead and check it out there. I used to have a website, but I don't really anymore. If you go to my website, it'll just take you to my WJ page. So that's where you can find me primarily. I'm on Found in the Wild on Instagram, but I don't post all that often. Twitter is really my primary place. In terms of where you can find the work outside of Wifwulf, right now there's a couple cool things that we're up to that you can check out at your local comic shop. You can check out Kang the Conqueror from Marvel. Issues 1 through 3 are out. Issue 4 is coming out next month. Issue 5 will come out the month after that. The whole run is 5 issues. It's like effectively a graphic novel. It's going to be just a blast. I'm loving this book, and it really means the world to me. So check that out. And then in April of next year, we have Batman Beyond Neo Year coming out from DC that with Max Dunbar that I can just already tell you is one of the coolest things. It's certainly the coolest thing we've ever gotten to do at DC. It is a unbelievable honor, and the work that Max is doing on that is incredible. Bidakar's doing the lettering and it's just breaking all the rules. It's fucking great. So that's awesome. Harbinger at Valiant right now with Robert Rodriguez and Rico Renzi and Hassan, and it's just a wonderful crew of people over there. And we're breaking some other rules and going really weird over there. So basically, you can look at any of the superhero companies and grab something from us right now, which is a dream and a delight. Star Trek Year 5 is done, so if you like Star Trek, you can go check that out. The whole run is now out. I think the last trade comes out next month, and that'll be amazing. And then I get to start bothering IDW about a hardcover of the whole thing, because I want it more than life itself. And if you really want to do me a favor, you can go onto YouTube and look up The Archive Unboxed, which is a fun little behind-the-scenes series that I did about horror props in movies, where we go into the WB archive and unbox a lot of weird, cool prop stuff from Beetlejuice. We had the art director from Beetlejuice, and we got to reintroduce him to the model from the beginning of Beetlejuice for the first time in 30 years. It was a wild time. I got to direct the whole show. It was just a real great time. And I'm trying to drive up those numbers so that Warner sees that it's worth making a bunch of these, because I think we should do more of them about Batman and about the Justice League and about all of the other cool stuff that Warner Brothers has over there, Mad Max. So hopefully we can get a track under us for that, but it'll really help if everybody who listens to this just goes and watches it on YouTube. It's 15 minutes. It's great. Tiffany Smith hosts. You'll have a blast. And that's what we're up to right now. At least that's the stuff I can talk about.
Always. You can find us at gatecrashers.fan. You can find us on all social media at GateCrashersPod. And catch us again soon. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.